Well, good day to you, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who were on the HBK High Performance podcast, just so you know, we are recording this on Zoom. So if you would like to also watch the video of this, it will be on our YouTube channel, which is HBK High Performance. So you can check that out. Please subscribe and like and share and comment, because I believe this is going to be a fantastic interview. And then for those of you on the podcast, if you want to reach out to me or to our special guest today, Rennie Curran, I will put contact information in so you can connect with us on social media and for further services. So today I've got Rennie Curran with me. He has been a guest in the past, but Rennie is number one, just a great human being, a good friend, a great son, a father, and you name it. As a human being, just an amazing person. He's got an excellent track record in his life of successes, and he continues that success in whatever he does. Rennie is a former NFL football player. He played for the Tennessee Titans. He played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He also played for Edmonton, right, in the Canadian League. He played for the University of Georgia in college, where he was a two-time All-American. He was a super hard hitter, and he got some awards for smashing on people, which is awesome. If you're going to play football, you might as well hit people hard, right? So Rennie is now a speaker, and he's a coach, trainer, and he speaks on personal brand. He speaks on mindset. He speaks on leadership and personal development. And he speaks all over the country. And he's had some great connection. He's connected to a lot of different organizations, and he helps young athletes. So I do recommend, if you are looking for someone who can coach you and help you get over some struggles in your life, or help you develop, because all of us, if we're going to develop in life, we need someone to walk along that journey with us. And Rennie's a great listener. He shares timely wisdom. So I'd say reach out to Rennie Curran and book him for a workshop that you can have, a speaking event, or as a coach for your team. He can really help your executives go to another level. I've seen him do it. I've watched him in action. He's fantastic. Rennie, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks so much for having me, Mike. Glad to be on.
Yeah, man. So Rennie and I, we talked, we've been friends for years. We actually shared a stage for a mutual friend of ours. It's been a while now, six years ago, maybe. And we've kept in touch, and, at some points we're in a lot more touch than others, and we've been able to do some joint things even after that. But Rennie and I are bonded in friendship. We're both athletes. I play basketball. Rennie doesn't come on the court. I think it's because he doesn't want to show me up, but he says he doesn't really play basketball, but, no, we just are bonded. We do very similar things in the marketplace, and our hearts are really just to help people grow and thrive. But he and I talked the other day with all the social unrest that we found, going on in America. And I've been just deeply, deeply convicted by what's happened in our country, and my ignorance, and not consciously, but unconsciously ignoring it for years and years and years, and even having cynicism and my thoughts that come out about, the movement of Black Lives Matter, and some of the things that have happened with the police over many, many years, just kind of rolling my eyes and saying, oh, it's not as bad as everyone's making it out to be, or, other things that have, gone through my mind that I'm sure we'll share today. And so Rennie and I had a conversation. It was probably about 6 or 7 months ago, where I asked him, I said, Rennie, you grew up in Georgia. It's the deep South. you're Black, and Rennie is a first generation African American, and I want him to share his story about that. But I said, what was your experience like growing up as a Black man in the Deep South? And he started to tell me the story. And I think it was at that point that I started to really get a much broader perspective. You know, I had grown up in an area where, you know, I grew up around Black people, Latinos, and, you know, I had my experiences, but I never really put myself in their shoes to say, what's life like from their filter, from their perspective? And so I always butted up against that idea of white privilege. And, oh, my goodness, I've worked for everything I have, you know, and you kind of get frustrated with that attitude. Like, why would you say I'm privileged? I work hard, you know. But when Rennie shared his story, it just really convicted me and made me realize there are things that he has had to work through that I will never have to work through. So, Rennie, thanks for your vulnerability, and also your vulnerability to be able to come on here and share with our audience, who is predominantly, you know, white, middle-aged Americans, right, and kind of just sharing your story and kind of giving us some perspective, because I think to bridge the gap in our country, we've got to just be open. We've got to be vulnerable. And we've got to validate each other and be empathetic, and not be prideful and get our back up. So I'm going to shut up now. And I just love for you to kind of share your history story and what's it like to grow up as a Black man in America, where it is predominantly white, and there are definitely unconscious biases that we don't pay attention to.
So I'll just start just really back from my childhood, and you know, I'm hoping everybody that is listening, and thank you for giving me the platform to share and to speak. And you know, I think it's so important what you said, just about coming from a place of love and not really trying to demonize anybody, because I don't think at the end of the day there's people out there who are looking at this and are just straight up hateful and are just, you know, just pridefully ignorant about these types of things. I think there are more so than ever before, there are people who want to learn and want to listen. Of course, there's always going to be those who completely shut out the idea that things like racism exist or oppression or any type. But I think the majority are really trying to learn and open up to the idea of the existence of these types of things. And I think that's where it starts, is actually wanting to know, wanting to educate yourself, and wanting to see and understand a perspective that's different than yours. And I think once you can take that approach, it only leads to growth, you know, and that's with anything, whether it's in the business world or whether it's in a relationship that's not going well, or whether it's with social issues. It's just having an opening to wanting to learn and wanting to change, and kind of getting tired of the same old norm, and then being able to see your blind spots as well. So like I said, I'll start with my childhood, and basically, as you mentioned, both my parents were Liberian immigrants. So I had a completely different outlook just on life early on, really understanding my culture. And as I grew, it was definitely something that was tough early on, because when you think about it, anything concerning Africa or the culture or whatnot, it necessarily wasn't anything of pride, especially when you look at how it's represented in this country. A lot of times you're going to see things about wildlife, you're going to see things about the indigenous life, but you're not going to hear about the rich cultural heritage and the values and the different things that make up African family and African village, or just all the things that really make it great. Like, for example, my great grandfather was a chief. So he built his own village. He was a leader in his town. You know, there's so many different things that I was able to take from that, just understanding the lineage and the heritage that I come from, that conflicted with the narrative that's presented to you as an African-American male in this country. When you think about the school system, for example, which there's major inequality there. I mean, you talk about social issues and racism and all that, but a lot of it starts there, honestly. The first thing you learn about yourself as a Black male in this country is that you're a slave. You're brought on a slave ship. They don't tell you anything about your heritage beyond that. So what does that do to your perception of yourself? You know, what does that do to your self-worth when that's the first thing you hear about yourself? And then you compound with the images that are presented to you through the media, whether it's like through a sitcom or whether it's through a movie or through music. All those different things play such a major influence on who you believe you can become and who you believe you are. And that's a major issue. I feel like, and for me, I had to really learn how to navigate that as a young child. So I'm in school, I'm learning about these things, I'm watching TV, I'm seeing Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and these different images that are presented to me. And then I'm at home with my African parents, my Liberian parents, who are teaching me about the values and about how we do things in our household. Because once you're in that household, you're in Liberia, you're no longer in America. You know, all your values and the things that you understand, your perspective, it starts at home. So, and then I went to a church that was mostly West African. And so I learned all these different values, but then I'm battling, like I said, being in the school system, seeing the images on media and whatnot. And then about 10 years old is when we moved to the suburbs. So we moved from an area that was predominantly African-American and Hispanic to an area that was majority white. I'd say about 90%. We were the one of only, I'd say out of probably 100 houses, we were probably the second Black family that moved in there. So like things changed drastically. So now I have to learn a whole new culture, right? Is this a culture shock? You go in and you're the only Black male in your classroom, and it was a challenge. My first experience, I was like 8, about to turn 9 years old, but within, I'd say, my first to second month there, I had my first experience with racism in the neighborhood. We made friends with a little girl. I think I told you the story. We made friends with a little girl that lived down the street from me, and we're all playing basketball like most kids. And we get to that point where we're kind of tired, we're ready to take a break, and she's like, "I'm about to go get some water. You guys want anything?" And she's innocent and joyful as any child will be at that age. So she goes in through her garage and leaves the door open. And me and my sister, I got 2 older sisters, so me and my middle sister were extremely close. We did everything together. So we're hanging out with her. She goes in and talks to her mom about getting some water, and then we overhear the conversation. And her mom's like, "Tell them to get their own water." Like, I don't, just basically like in that spirit of they're not welcome here. And knowing where we were, like the fact that we were the only, pretty much the only Black family in the neighborhood, I mean, it just struck me, in a way that I had never felt before. And it just started this whole chain of just like this awareness for me of being a Black male, and then understanding how society received me and how they saw me. And so on one hand, I was on that edge of like innocence and like being a child. And then I noticed that as I grew, as I became 11, 12 years old, that innocence started to shift to being seen as like a problem, being seen as like a threat just by existing in certain spaces. So that's, walking down the street in my neighborhood, or that's going trick-or-treating and knocking on certain doors, or, I tried that. That's when I tried to get into entrepreneurship. So walking around my lawnmower and just getting stares and nobody say hi. So all those things make you really you internalize a lot of those things. And so even if somebody isn't racist or isn't looking at you funny, it's like that internal conversation that happens because it has happened before. Yeah. So that starts young. And so the thing that really, of course, changed things was football. Being able to join a team, being able to see and learn different perspectives, and sports is the most amazing thing because it brings so many different races together. It's the great equalizer when you get guys, and I know without a doubt that I had guys on my teams whose parents did not necessarily, some of them were racist, some of them didn't like, but we all became a family because we all sweat together, we fought together. And I mean, it changed everything. It changed my perception. Like as I grew, as I became a University of Georgia player and whatnot, it changed how people perceive me. And you see a lot of athletes who speak out and talk about different things when it comes to oppression and whatnot. And people say, "Oh, how would you know about that? Like you're an athlete. You you got all this money. Like, what do you know about oppression? What do you know about this? But I realized that, yes, I was on this team. I was seen in this light in the community as a star athlete and whatnot. But the minute I take that jersey off, I'm still a black man. So
yeah.
at 15 years old, I'm still, that was the craziest thing that I saw. So to give you an example, I would get pulled over for no reason, right? And so the conversation would go one way with the police officer. It'd usually be negative until they looked at my license plate and saw that my name is Rennie Curran. And then the whole conversation shifted, right, to something positive. Like, oh man, Georgia, yeah. And it's all good. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what if my name wasn't Rennie Curran? What if I didn't play football? What if I didn't have? So it's almost like sports provided that shield. It's a type of privilege. Speaking of privilege, and I want to clarify that too, just from my perspective, because I know when people hear that word, the white privilege thing, that it can be something frustrating. And, at the end of the day, I think one thing that's not talked about is that we all have a type of privilege. I have a privilege we have privileges being males. We have privileges being healthy. To have two parents is a privilege. To be in America, in certain parts of America, that's a privilege, depending on what zip code you're born in. So everybody has privilege, and to say that somebody has white privilege is not saying that you didn't have to work hard, or that life isn't tough, or that nobody else has benefits, or that we're saying you're better than us. What it is saying is there's just certain things that you don't have to think about. And I'll give a perfect example. Like for me, being the youngest in my family, I don't have to worry about always being in charge. Like usually my older sister takes that role. Like there's just things I don't have to worry about. And I feel like as a white male, as a white person, there are just certain things that that really generally, for the most part, don't have to cross your mind, or that you don't have to consider. Which, should it be that way? No, but that's the reality. Just like with any privilege, do you deserve it? Do we deserve any privilege we have? Are we responsible for it? Like, no. Should we feel guilty for it? No, but it is something that exists.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some of my thoughts, man. I don't know if you have any other questions, but those are just some of the thoughts and experiences that I've had.
Yeah, you also told me about something that it struck me. I'll never forget it. You said that when you were out later in your childhood, like when you'd be out after 8 o'clock or something, all of a sudden police officers would start showing up in the different neighborhoods, and you would get, tell us a little bit about that. And what did that do, for you? Because I know you're a super smart guy. You're super disciplined. You're super aware. What did that do for you as far as like, oh, I got to play by a different set of rules.
Right.
And, tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, that started, like I said, my early days, and it still happens now. It's not like these things just happen and then it just stops. Like at any time, I have to always be aware. I always have to think about how the world receives me, and how I carry myself, how I'm dressed, my body language. I had to think about every single move every time I walk outside of my door. Like, being 16, 17 years old, I got my first truck, and I happened to be driving in the wrong side of town, and I get pulled over. The first question I ask isn't for license or registration. Is this car stolen? Do you have drugs in here? Are there guns in here? And then from there, it doesn't stop there. I don't get the benefit of the doubt. The police officer is asking me to get out of my car, and it's searching my car for no reason, no warrant, there's no smell of alcohol. Like I never touched alcohol or weed or anything until like I got in the league, basically. But they still will find a way to have some suspicion, and then all of a sudden I'm outside of my car and I'm getting searched, and I can't leave until he searches my car. And it's still happens to this day. Like maybe 6 to 8 months ago, I decided to go early to a speaking engagement. I had a elementary school I was speaking to. It was in North Georgia. And, I drove out there. It's probably about 10 o'clock when I went out there, because it was like maybe 2-3 hours away. So, and the engagement was at 8 o'clock. And so I wanted to make sure I was good. I didn't have to get up and drive. So went there the night before and stopped to get gas. When I turned out from the gas station around like 10:30, it was nobody on the road, like old country town, like just me in the road. And then all of a sudden I noticed the cars following me, and you know, I'm still good. I'm driving or whatever. I was on the phone with the girl I was dating at that time. And all of a sudden get pulled over just out of nowhere. And it's now about 11:30. And so just picture this, you're on the road, like just you and nobody else. It's dark, no lights. Police officer rolls up and all he says is, I need you to get out of your car. And that's it. Like, I'm like, what did I do? It's like, just step out of your car, please. And of course, my heart's beating fast. Like I've seen at this point how many times situations like this have happened, and what it's turned out to be. And the thing about it too is, like, if anything were to go down, he decides he feels that he's a threat or anything like that, I get shot. Like, it's my character against his, right? And it's like, in that situation, even though I know I didn't do anything wrong, even though I know I'm completely innocent and I'm about to go impact a community, like, I still have to be at his mercy, basically. And so not only do I get out the car, and not only does he, search me and put me through all these sobriety tests and whatnot, then he asked me repeatedly, is there anything in your car? Is there drugs? Is there guns? I'm like, dude, no, like, I have nothing. I'm going to speak at a school. Still persist, and would not, then after a while, 2 other cars pull up, and then would not let me leave until he searched my car. And I'm just like, it just is I don't even know the word for it. It's humiliating. It's you feel like your manhood's being taken from you. Like, you really have no rights in those situations. As much as people say, oh, know your rights, know your rights. Nah, you ain't got no rights. If a police officer makes up in his mind that like, you're in this town to do something or whatever, or he has some suspicion, or he sees you in whatever light that he sees you, or has whatever bias, you don't have no rights at that point. And if you try in any way to stand up for yourself or stand on your rights, it's always seen as like you're resisting, or you're being defiant or whatever. And so those is some of the most challenging things. And to get somebody to understand what that feels like, it's the hardest until you know what that feels like. And that's just with police officers, right? Like, there's situations where I've gone into stores and been followed around. I'm just trying to get a candy bar. And I'm being followed around. Like, every time I look back, the person just happens to be in my aisle. Situations like that have happened to the point where it's like, all right. Or being in the classroom with a teacher that just believes that you're that problem child. So anything you do, everybody else can be talking and you talk, but you're the one that gets that gets highlighted, right? Or sent to the office or whatnot. And the tough thing about it is, when somebody else hasn't experienced it, then it's almost like you're trying to play the victim, and you're trying to say, oh, this, woe is me. But when it's your reality, man, it's so real. It's so real. I mean, even in the NFL, man, like, when I made to the NFL, I could go on and on about the experiences, like the biases and the microaggressions. And that's what I want people to understand is, it's not overt racism. Like, notice I never mentioned somebody just outright coming out and call me the N-word, or like saying anything like they're gonna hang me or anything like that. It's no extreme like that. But it's those little microaggressions. It's just the differences in how you're treated, those small little differences that stand out over time and that make you numb. Even in the NFL, I had guys who were put in higher positions than me just because of perception. All right. There was a teammate who I was actually helping when I was with Tampa Bay. And the coaches, after a while, they were like, okay, we're going to give him this position because they told me straight up, we feel like you don't have the mental capacity to handle these things. Not knowing I was helping him, like, to learn. Yeah. And just like experiences like that, man, it really is disheartening. And a lot of people experience that in different areas of our society, whether it's in the corporate space, or
Yeah.
whether it's, you know, in the school system, whether it's in, you know, sports. I mean, in so many different areas. And if people aren't aware of their biases and aware of like their blind spots, they can very easily be participating in these things without even knowing it. I mean, it could be as simple as if you're a CEO of a company or somebody who's in charge of hiring, and you see a certain name pop up, right? And you just all of a sudden you see a Muhammad pop up, or you see a Letitia pop up, and then all of a sudden you get these preconceived notions. Not being aware of those things, it's detrimental. And I think that's the true work that has to be done, is for people to be aware of their blind spots and their biases. And because it's not, when I think about the issues in our country, it's not the overt racism, it's not the guy with the KKK and the hoodie on. They do exist, yes, and they're out there.
Yeah.
But those are the everyday forms of it that fly under the radar.
Yeah. Well, Rennie, I just appreciate so much. I think it's you saying that, you know, it's so true. But, you know, I'm a behavioral scientist. So, you know, getting down, you know, when I focus on culture, leadership, and change behavior, that's my specialty. You know? And I told you the other day, I guess from that idea that culture, what is your culture is your underlying assumptions or your underlying philosophies. That's what your culture is. And when I go and work with organizations, that's what I'm looking for. What's the water cooler talk? What's going on in people's minds? When we do a anonymous survey, what is coming out? You know, the reality where I don't have to worry about what anybody says. I'm about to get my word in now, you know, and they put their word in and how they really feel. And I told you, you know, I can't speak for all middle-aged white Americans. I can't. Just like you can't speak for all Black, you know, young athletes and successful entrepreneurs in America. You can't do it. But we can share a perspective that may or may not reflect how other people are feeling. So I told you, you know, how I grew up. You know, I grew up in an area that was pretty diverse, and because I played basketball, you know, the higher level basketball you go, I mean, it's more and more the higher level you go, there's predominantly Black athletes. And there were a few teams I was on that I was the only white dude or one of very few white guys. And but basketball was the cause that brought us together. You know, so my parents were overtly against racism. My dad grew up in an area where he saw some things that I think scarred him. And he was so adamant. I mean, we weren't, if there was any racist undertone in my house, I remember one time a guy said something, it was about Shaq, and it wasn't like an overt comment. My dad just ripped him a new one. I never forget it, because that's how I grew up. And then, you know, I even dated Black girls, you know, it just was never an issue for me. Then I'm in the military, where I was one of few white people in my entire division. We had mostly Pacific Islanders, Filipinos, because I was stationed in Japan, lots of Asian, Latinos, and Black, and then white. We together were minorities, and we joke about that. Like you guys even said, now you know what it's like to live in my shoes for a little while, you know. It was a joke, but I didn't think anything of it. And I get home, and you get into corporate America, and again, I can't speak for every white middle-aged American male, but I can say things started to creep in, man. And that's what I'm mostly embarrassed of, is like, here's an example, and I'd like to hear your response to this, because I think it's important. If we're gonna change, if you can get the subconscious mind to come out into the conscious thought, we can change it. That's what we can change. But it has to be, like we talked about, loving, open dialogue to say, hey, Rennie, this is what's going on. Help me understand. I say these things partly out of ignorance, so I need educated. And the same vice versa. You know, I think I'm assuming that there's also with Black Americans this assumption about white Americans. And until we have that open dialogue and go, no, here's what's really going on. Like, here's an example of how I started to allow things to creep in. So, like, the idea of white privilege, and it's like, there's every opportunity is available. This is America, and the fight for freedom here is for everybody, you know, assuming that the freedoms that are afforded to me are the same as they are afforded to everybody else. And then, like, the movement of Black Lives Matter. Now, the organization, the statement versus the organization are very two different things.
Exactly,
you know? But the statement, Black Lives Matter, it's like, well, you know, you get that, well, all lives matter, because it buds up against that subconscious feeling that you're singling me out as a white male, saying my life doesn't matter, and you're elevating yourself. Where if there's a problem, we need to focus on it, right? And that's the unconscious bias that I've had, is like, well, all lives matter. Like, what are you talking about? Like, because I was not willing to be convicted by the true issues. It was butting up against my own unconscious biases. So I got defensive. And human beings have to know this. If you get defensive about something, it's probably hitting a pain point in there somewhere. And then, you know, the other thing about being a white, middle-aged, and even white privileged American is you hear things like you hear things about people being racist really quickly. And so this is what I told you the other day, where I am so embarrassed is that as a white, middle-aged male, my feeling gets like this, Rennie. Like, honestly, I feel like I'm so ignorant that and it's partly my fault, because I haven't honestly dove in and said, let me spend time in the communities and let me get the perspective that I need, that I say, well, I don't want to say anything because here again, you can hear the bias here, but I'm just being honest. Is, well, if I say anything at all and I say it the wrong way, I'm going to be called a racist, a sexist, a bigot, and I can't win. So I'm just not going to say anything. You know, I'm so tired of, you know, being typecasted. I've worked hard for everything. Again, back to that me, selfish mentality. And again, I'm so sorry, and I'm so embarrassed by my own underlying philosophies. But, you know, I don't think I'm alone. I'm not going to speak for everybody else, but I will tell you, I don't think I'm alone in that. And there's also a couple of other things, Rennie. So in the 90s, I grew up in the 90s. I loved Tupac. I loved Biggie Smalls. I loved Eazy-E, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg. I loved those dudes. Like, that's what I listened to, much to the chagrin of my parents. They didn't like some of the lyrics. But the perception, okay, that those guys brought. And I think it was backlash to saying, you know what, if you're going to treat us like this, well, we're going to act like it then. You know, if you want. But the idea that, from the white perspective, and most of the album sales went to suburban white kids. Right. Okay. And so the idea is that I think that typecasted Black America to suburban white folks. Right. And that is, oh, Black people are thugs, or they just, and so that being ingrained in people's minds is absolute trash. It's absolute garbage. But that perception gets put into the subconscious bias. And Black people are cool. You know, they're cooler than white people, and they dress better, and I can't get away with that. You know what I mean? And I think with that came a little bit of resentment and jealousy. I can't speak for everybody else. I'm just observing as well. All of that, when you separate the value of human life from what people do, you can begin to create an entity in a division. And so there's this entity, I think, has been created, which is Black, white. And your entity is you're cool, you dress cool, you
Right.
know, predominant athletes that are just, you know, you hear the BS, dude, about like black people
Right.
have better muscle twitches than white guys, and that's why they can jump better, which is complete garbage.
Yeah.
But what I'm doing though with that is I'm actually creating a separate entity.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and not let's celebrate the fact that, dude, your dad, your grandpa was a chief, man. Like, how cool is that? Why can't we celebrate heritage and look back and talk about the differences? My family's Scottish. I can trace my lineage back to the 11th century. You know, I know my history. Why can't we celebrate that together?
Right.
Right. But anyways, I wanted to bring some of those things up, and of course, those are just a few.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on those things and responses, and you know, how can we bridge this gap and, you know, change these unconscious biases and create new unconscious streaming thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, man, and you hit on a couple things just in terms of the image that's been presented, in terms of like the ignorance, and when I think about first just talking about the image that's been presented of African Americans in this country, I mean, it's so deeply rooted. It's from a historical standpoint, when you look at like how we've been presented from the beginning, it's never been in a positive way. You know, like, so when you speed it up till the present, to like the 80s, 90s with the hip hop rap and whatnot, even though it was seen and received by suburban communities, it still wasn't in a positive way. It still wasn't in a way where, you know, it has anything to do with leadership or like change and positivity. And I feel like it was more of an escape for those in the suburban communities than it was something that was promoted. You know, as a way to really have like an alternate ego type of thing. But like when I think about the fact that like even before this image was created, what do you have to do to create an image? You first have to destroy the original one. And that's probably the biggest issue with the African American people here, is the fact that the culture was completely stripped. Like I am, you know, the version of what I believe that original African Americans were, like knowing about their heritage, knowing about their values, knowing about all the things that, you know, having that village mentality. And once you're stripped of that, it's like you're really gonna have no culture. And that's some of the issues that we face in the African American community that holds us back. And it goes all the way back to slavery, just being stripped of your identity and then being filled with images of yourself that may or may not be real. So I talked about, you know, just being in my childhood, seeing Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, watching the news. Every time I see an African American male, he's in handcuffs, as opposed to being a politician or a lawyer or a doctor. I can't tell you how many. Like, I had one African American teacher my whole entire educational career, a female. One principal that was African American in my elementary school days. But you don't think that makes a difference? You know, just your community and that's generational. So like when you talk about image, man, and just the subconscious biases and all those things that we have, it's such a major challenge because of the historical context of it, and we really have to identify those things and where it stems from if we're going to move forward. And that's on both sides, because it's so generational now that like it's so deeply rooted into the culture that now if you go to elementary school in inner city, like kids genuinely believe that like they have to do certain things that will be perceived as success, or that they have to listen to certain type of music that will be seen as success, or like, I mean, they have to dance, or they have to know how to do this. And these things that didn't just start there, is not just because they love these rappers, it's generational and it's deep, you know, especially when you don't have, and I think about when I went up to Canada, one thing that's not talked about, and I'll share it with you, is Canadians, they're talked about as being more progressive, right? But when it comes to their relations with the Native Americans up there, it's almost the same dynamic. if you were to go up there and you were to see how their relations are with the Native Americans up there and how their culture is, it's like the same. When I went up there to play Canadian football, it was like the same dynamics. Like when you look at the African American relationship down here, how everything from health to education to, you know, the diseases that they have, the diseases that we have, it's the same. It was crazy just seeing how when a culture is stripped or when a group of people is stripped, how that's expressed in their communities, like years later. So that's the first thing. And then in terms of the ignorance, man, I honestly don't get angry. You know, when I hear like somebody like yourself says like, I just didn't know or whatever, like I'll give you a perfect analogy. In my church, there was a guy there who had cerebral palsy. He was one of our pastors and he was severely disabled, but he was an activist. So he would come to our church and he would talk to us about the different things that he's doing for those who are disabled, those who have cerebral palsy, those who, you know, just putting access into buildings, right? So fighting to get ramps at buildings and fighting to get like handicap accessible things in hotels. Like he was part of that movement. But because I'm an athlete and because I'm healthy, like these are things that don't cross my mind. Like I've never gone to a building and thought, okay, is there a ramp here or not? Like it's just never ever has been a thing for me. It's not part of my world. I'm privileged in that way. But fast forward to 2017, I tear my patella tendon. I have to spend 6 months in a wheelchair and a straight leg. It completely changed my perspective. For the first time in my life, I saw what life was like as a disabled person.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, things that did not matter to me, all of a sudden now it became very, very important to me. And it changed the way I looked at the world. And I was just like, wow. And it made me understand different perspectives of people who aren't affected by certain things and how it can very easily pass under the radar. And so I understand, man. And I think that's one of the biggest things that will change our society is shared experience. And you hear a lot of times from people who their child, either their older individual and their child ends up being with a person, dating a person that's of a different race or minority, and they have a child, right? So now their grandchild is of a mixed race. And so now the issues that are part of that community, they have to start thinking about it because now somebody is connected to that they love. You know, there's just, or sports, right? Or military. You fight together, you develop this bond, this relationship that surpasses race. So you stop seeing that person as just a Black person or just that becomes your brother. And now those issues that are tied to them become important to you. So there has to be that connection and shared experience if we're really going to move our communities forward and really help people develop that awareness.
Yeah, and that's so good, Rennie. And I appreciate that perspective on privilege too, and that really, it does help. But you know, I lost a friend when I was in the Middle East who was Black. Who's from Brooklyn, New York. Great guy, one of my best friends when I was in the military. We went through boot camp together, A school together. We ended up getting stationed together. We stayed in the same barracks when we got there. I mean, we played spades together. We were on watches together. And I think the idea, like another thing that again, white people just have to think about in general, you know, and I'm speaking of myself when I say this, is like, I was so offended because of, you know, him giving his life, you know, for freedom during the national anthem protests. You know, I was so offended by that. I was just livid. And I'm thinking there's a better way to do this. And potentially there was, but now a couple years later, we tie back to that and we go, we were fools. You know, because honestly, like I think about Jake's dying as a Black man for freedom, and thinking that, well, you're kneeling against what he did for us, you know, as a nation. Like, why he's your color, he did this. But if freedom isn't free for everybody, it's not freedom. It's just not. And that we got, you know, what we fought and bled for was for everybody. And we're still trying to create this divide. And again, there's so many other things that I've heard. And honestly, Rennie, I've pushed up against a little bit just to keep my own boundaries, but I haven't fought for this. Like, for example, well, slavery was abolished 160 years ago. My goodness. Civil rights movement, you know, it used to be that interracial couples couldn't marry, like it wasn't allowed. And now interracial couples can marry, and Black people used to not be able to vote. Now they can vote. And it's almost like this. And we did affirmative action, which I don't think was necessarily a great thing, but we've done affirmative action. And I'm talking from the white perspective is, what more do you want from us? You know, what more do you want? We give you all these privileges, and now what more do you want? But you hear the divide, you know, and you hear that, you can hear, and what I'm saying, it's an us versus them. And last I checked, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, even though a lot of those people were slave owners. I mean, we have to be honest about that. But you look back and you say, it's we the people. And although at the time, I believe it was out of ignorance and social norms, you get wrapped up into social norms that these underlying philosophies and assumptions just, they stream on, because we live 95% of our lives in streaming subconscious. We don't even know that those things are there. And then something like this happened. And it started for me with the Ahmaud Arbery thing. And I just saw this kid get murdered in cold blood, dude. And I'm thinking, there's no way. If I was running, even if I broke into a place, Rennie, I'm thinking there is not a snowball's chance in hell I'm getting gunned down. No freaking way they would shoot me. They might stop me. They might threaten me. There is not a chance I'm getting shot. And then, you know, George Floyd situation obviously highlights it even more. You're flabbergasted that this could possibly happen. And then, you know, since then, it's just been all these unconscious biases for me come to the table. And the fact is, the freedom that we espouse in this country is not the same freedom for everybody, not yet. And I know what white privilege means now. It isn't an attack. It isn't a stigma. It's about awareness, and it's about us saying, you know what? Let me be honest about where I come from and what I think about. I mean, dude, I'm never going to a grocery store, and I've never in my life, and I even stole when I was a kid. I was a thief as a kid. But I could go in and smile at the lady at the counter and go take gum or go take whatever I wanted and smile and, oh, nice little boy. I've never walked into a store and had somebody looking at me funny or chasing me around, and never had a cop pull me over and just pull me out. And I've been pulled over quite a bit. I go fast sometimes, you know. Never had that. I just don't. You know what I mean? And so either I can fight what is, or we can work with it. And I just believe, like I told you, this is a hill worth dying on, man. This is a foxhole worth jumping in and protecting and saying, you know what? It's time for us to bridge this gap. And my dream is, you know, as I've been thinking about this, my dream is that we can have ongoing conversations like this. And if I say something that is racially or even gender, we got the gender, you know, biases. And, you know, if I say something that's insensitive, that you don't judge my heart. And I think that's what the fear is that for white middle-aged males is you're going to judge my heart, and all of a sudden I'm typecasted. And to be labeled a racist or a sexist, dude, that is a major stigma on your reputation. But to put myself out there and go, I'm willing to say what needs to be said. And if I say it wrong, Rennie, pull me aside, dude. And you said that, this is how I took it. And I go, oh my gosh, again, unconscious, didn't mean it. You know, I didn't mean it like that. So I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that, or even to address again, those unconscious biases of, well, we've given so much back to the Black communities, and, you know, and still you're not happy. Like, what, please, you know, whatever you can share about that, you know, help me.
I mean, I think the first thing, when just going back to what you said about saying the wrong things, and being afraid of the backlash and just the labeling, I think that people have to understand there's so much hurt involved with this. Like when you do hear from somebody who says that, it's coming from a place of hurt a lot of times. And as a African American male, I can speak firsthand for how a lot of us feel. It feels like it feels like you're walking around with 400 pounds in your back, like at all times. And I think I told you that, but to know that the possibility exists that you can be jogging and that somebody can think that you just robbed a place instead of just that you're jogging, and that they can just hop in their car and decide that you're a threat and possibly take your life. To know that that's a possibility, that's, that's real. It's real mental stress. Like it's real pressure. And to know that you can be driving and at any point you can get pulled over and somebody can think you did an odd movement or that you have something. It could be a brush, it could be whatever, and they could just decide that they're just going to shoot you without even, you don't even make it to the courtroom. To know that's a possibility, it's real mental stress. So if you say something that comes off the wrong way to somebody and they backlash, just understand like that's the weight and pressure of what they're dealing with. Not to say it's right to attack anybody, because I think we all want to be understood and accepted, but just to give you understanding and insight. And then I think the second thing to follow up with that is people understand, regardless of what you say, people can feel and understand intention, right? So if you're saying something out of love, out of wanting to understand, out of wanting to serve, out of wanting to learn, your intention will come through. Regardless of how you say it, it may come out the wrong way, but if it's from the heart, even if it's not said the right way, I'm telling you, those people, I'm not saying it's blanket statement for everybody, because some people are just so hurt that they don't want to hear anything.
Yeah, understood.
They don't educate anybody. They don't want to have anything to do with it. But for the majority of people, I can say like they will take the time to listen and really try to educate you on how you make them feel. And then I think when people do say things like, "Oh, we got affirmative action. We got a black president."
Yeah, right.
That's
another one.
That. I think they're looking at things objectively instead of subjectively. Like they're just picking and choosing a few things to paint the overall picture of somebody's experience, which a lot of times we don't know each other's subjective experience. Right. So you can always point at one or two things and say, "Oh, well, you did this, you did." But does that tell the true experience, true story of my entire subjective experience? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when people, look at just the progress that we made in society, yes, it's there in terms of the objective, like the positions and, the numbers may have increased or whatever. But does that tell the story of bias? Does that tell the story of how many times you've been overlooked or for things that you don't even know? It doesn't tell that story at all. Just the everyday experience. You may get that position, but does that mean you're able to go into that facility, right? Like if I get a position as a CEO of a company or a board member, does that tell the experience of me going in a room and having to walk on eggshells because I have to be perfect at everything I do because I'm the only black one in the room? It's just like, is that real progress? If I'm the only one in that position, and I have to like literally anything that I say can be taken the wrong way at any time. I have to walk the perfect line. I mean, is that real progress? So that's there's one thing to be accepted and another thing to be tolerated.
Yeah. Gosh, man.
Yeah. So
there's so much to unpack, and again, I think it's just these have to be ongoing conversations. I am all about like in organizations, in corporate organizations, like having initiatives for women of ethnic background, of males of ethnic background, all races. I would just love to see again in all corporate organizations, especially because that's my focus is let's just talk and look, we're all here for the same vision,
right?
We're under the same identity. We have the same values. We have the same standards. Let's talk about though honest challenges that we all face while we're fighting towards solving problems for our clients. Like that's what we're there to do in corporate America. But let's talk about, what are your challenges, Rennie? And let me tell you what my challenges are. And and let's truly be a culture that morphs together. And dude, your background, your experiences add so much to the equation, right? But it can't be, like you said, like diversity, toleration. We got you in here because you're black. Like, let's fit you in so we can put you on our brochure and let everybody know we're diverse so that we can check a box. Because that happens, man. I think it's trash, but it happens. And I think we just have to be humble, which is a huge word when it comes to this, is the humility. And also, the last thing I'll say about this, because I know your time is so valuable. I appreciate you taking it. I want to make sure that we do some promotion for you here too, is when it comes to the idea of slavery being abolished 160 years ago, I'm a culture expert, okay?
Right.
With culture, philosophies are passed down from generation to generation, okay? Most people have hung out and spent time with their great-grandparents. Think about the generation. They passed on philosophies that were from their parents and their grandparents, okay? So if you think about the gap, it's not that far.
Right.
So this idea that this philosophy of slavery has been abolished, it's not true.
Right.
Now, as far as our corporeal world, yes, it has been officially abolished and we are making progress. But for us to stop this conversation, assuming just because now you can vote or, there can be interracial couples and, there's opportunity for you to have corporate jobs and to start your own business. The mentality is still prevalent. So we have to keep digging and keep digging to change the subconscious patterns. So I want everybody to understand that, like, and if we keep sharing in the schools, and this is a call out to the education system too, if we keep sharing just about slavery and you're here because you're a slave, that is, it's Pavlov's theory. If you call somebody by a bad name, they're going to live up to it.
Right.
And that's base psychology. So we need to really keep these conversations alive, man.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And, just thinking about that slavery and the mentality, I think about so many examples of that in different forms. Like you can look at somebody who's raped or somebody who was incarcerated for a long time. Even after they get out of those situations, you can still tell whether it's in their conversation, whether it's how they face challenges or whether they're able to overcome challenges or not, whether they're able to start relationships, like if they're successful in those things or not. Like it's all tied to the root causes of those things. So, I mean, we can definitely go on and on about that conversation when it comes to slavery and just the repercussion. And it to me, it wasn't more so just the slavery piece. It was the things like I said about how your culture, your identity is stripped and taken away from you. The family dynamic was ruined. And then even after that, like people act like it just signed that stroke of paper and that was it. Nah, there was the contract leasing, the policing system that was put in place, where tons of African Americans were arrested for petty crimes, if not nothing at all. And so slavery just turned into a different form of it. And then even my family's country, Liberia, people don't even understand this. They don't even teach this in the school system, but Liberia, I mean, they might spend like one little like segment talking about Liberia, but Liberia is so significant because a lot of free slaves went to Liberia. And the crazy thing about it is a lot of those free slaves, which some of them were cousins of George Washington, whatnot, which a lot of people don't know, but they took that same system and they applied it to African nation. So the indigenous people who were there already, they became slaves. So they only could do what they knew. And so they had the same democracy. They took the same system from America and they brought it to Liberia. Liberia is supposed to mean free. But like I said, those who were descendants of the free slaves, they were the ones who were the politicians. They were the ones who had prominent positions in society. And those who were indigenous were your cooks, your servants, your drivers. And this still affects our country to this day. Yeah, and it's when they had a civil war. I was born during the Civil War in 1988, but that was one of the major reasons why that Civil War happened, because it was between, they call them American Liberians or American Liberians, and the indigenous people. After all those years of oppression and whatnot, it finally came to a boiling point. There was a shift in the government, and it started the whole Civil War. So this, like, it's real.
Wow. I mean, maybe you and I could talk and figure out another angle at this, because the more we talk, the more I just want to keep on going with this conversation. But we are at an hour, and I want to promote the things that you do, because let's take our skin color and our backgrounds out of it. Rennie is a fantastic speaker, a coach, a trainer. He has authored a couple books. He authored Free Agent, which is his perspective. When he became a free agent in the NFL, he took time to reflect of kind of what got him there. And there's character principles, there's unchanging principles he talks about from a unique perspective. I highly recommend everybody get a copy of that book. I've read it. I have bought a box. I've passed it on to many people. And I think everyone needs to pick that up. And then you wrote a children's book. Help me with the title again. It's how to become a star, right?
What does it take to be a star?
What does it take to be a star? Yeah. So it's a great book too. I have a copy of that. And it's just a great perspective of, what it takes to be a star, how to, whatever you choose to do, how to have a vision, how to work hard, how to discipline yourself, how to get along with people and become great at your craft and doing what you're passionate doing. So, Rennie, how can people get a hold of you and, get in touch so that they can hire you to do some work for them?
Yeah, so the easiest way is just through my website. That's where you can find out everything about me and all the services that I offer and whatnot. That's just renniecurran.com.
Awesome. Everybody, as soon as you're done, get on renniecurran.com, buy his books, and bring him in to speak. He's excellent. I promise you will not regret bringing him in to speak at your organization. If you're, at the end of the year, if you're going to have a workshop, or if you're doing webinars right now and you want to bring him on, do that, because his influence, his energy, and his passion, and his wisdom and knowledge in your organization is going to help the culture, and it's going to help take people further, faster. So please get on renniecurran.com. And Rennie, again, thanks for this open dialogue. Thanks for hearing me out. I thank you for your forgiveness, and also helping to educate me and others who have listened to this. I hope everyone's gotten a lot out of this, and I would like to do it again, because I think we just need to keep this conversation alive.
Definitely. It's super important. I really appreciate you, man, with your continued success and all that you're doing, man. You're an amazing speaker and author as well. I've learned so much from just being around you and seeing how you do things and how you operate, man. So, yeah, I wish you continued success and blessings for you and your family.
All right, my friend. Thanks, Rennie. Have a good one, my friend. Everybody, till next time, we hope you tune in again on the HBK High Performance podcast. And again, subscribe, like, and comment on our YouTube channel here. All right, y'all. See you later.